Welcome to Dogsthorpe Infant School LaunchPad.
This is your captain speaking. We've been cleared for departure.
Okay, Eddie, start the countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Let's go.
This podcast is brought to you by Eddie Edster, the Dogsthorpe Infant School Wellbeing Dog.
Welcome back to Eddie's LaunchPads. It's a Dogsthorpe Infant School podcast for parents, teachers and schools. Now, if you joined us last week, and thank you for joining us if you did, if you haven't yet heard part 1 of this episode, then listen to it now because you're in for a real treat. The guest we've got today, his name is Ian Brown. He's worked with some very famous people, and he talked all about that last week. And go back and listen to part 1 and find out about all the wonderful people that he's worked with and met over the years. It is fascinating. Ian, thank you for joining us again this week. You mentioned last week about your tortoise, and I remember you saying that it was upside down, which gave you this story. Now, I was in Jersey many years ago. It was in the 80s, and I was visiting Darrell's Zoo. He had 2 giant tortoises, and one of them was on its back. And a crowd of us, I could see this crowd forming saying, look. And so we looked. And this tortoise was upside down. It had done exactly what your tortoise had done. But the incredible thing was it wasn't completely over. It had sort of gone over at an angle. And this other one went over and used its shell to push its friend back over onto its feet. And we watched it. Absolutely incredible. We watched them do it. It was as though, don't worry, mate, I'm coming. And he goes, I'm coming behind you. And he pushed him and he pushed him back over. It was absolutely incredible. And when you mentioned that story, it just reminded me of your story and how it all began. So listeners, if you didn't hear part 1, go and listen to part 1 and Ian will tell you how it all began. And from this one story sprang all of these other stories as well.
Absolutely. And they're all really inspired by real things that happened to real Albert. And real Albert himself, he's not a massive tortoise. He's not like the Gerald Durrell giant ones. Funnily enough, we had some involvement with Jersey Zoo a little while ago.
Oh, right.
Because they were having an anniversary for the tortoises there. And they had a special display over the whole island of Jersey of sort of statues of tortoises, all painted by a selection of artists and such like. And we did a special radio show there talking about Albert and the books and such like. And it was wonderful to be part of all that. And I believe those tortoises you saw, Dave, are still there, the original giant ones, because they live a long time. Real Albert himself is, as far as we're aware, more than 80 years old. He could go to 160 or so, we believe. My wife found him more than 50 years ago when she was a little girl in Kent. She was going home with her mum, and they found what they thought was a rock on the path near the house, but it wasn't a rock, it was a tortoise. No one came forward to claim him, so they took him home and kept on asking, notices in the newsagent window, lampposts, all that sort of thing. Anyone know this tortoise? Claim this tortoise? No one claimed him. They gave him a new home. They named him Albert ever since. We took him on at our home about 17, 18 years ago. And as I explained last week, very quickly, 5 years ago, my life changed from working in television and advertising and all sorts of things to writing the children's books that I'd always dreamed of writing. Decades and decades I dreamed of doing it. And because Real Albert flipped over in the garden, I was putting him the right way around. And luckily, publishers Graphegg liked the idea. They liked the pictures done by Owen Clark, who's my amazing illustrator on all the books that we do. And as I say, they're all inspired by Real Albert. Albert upside down, obviously, he goes upside down, and his little friends in the garden have to team up and use teamwork and get over all their little niggly differences to help him back on his feet. Albert and the Wind his lightweight salad, which he eats on a windy day. It really does blow away. And I thought, well, crikey, what if that happened and all his little friends brought it back to him? And then he has to be a bit creative with how he says thank you to all of the little animals when they're all spread all over the garden. Then I read an article, Dave. Always good to keep reading. Keep reading. You never know what you might come across. I found an article in a newspaper that said that they'd done a study, scientists had done a study on tortoise brains while they hibernate. And real Albert himself, he sleeps for about 5 months every winter. He goes down. And although they're pretty much shut down, they don't move, their breathing slows and everything. Scientists discovered that their brains are really busy. So they think they dream. So luckily, Owen, the illustrator, had been really nagging me. He'd gone, I want to paint some dinosaurs. I love dinosaurs. And I said, well, how can we have dinosaurs? He's a little tortoise in a garden. And luckily, I read this article about them dreaming. And I thought, well, crikey, he could have a dream about his cousins, the dinosaurs. So Albert Supersize, he's with the dinosaurs. Then when he was younger, Albert was a very naughty tortoise. They've got little claws. And he used to dig under the fence all the time and get out. And luckily, the neighbours knew him, and they'd say, "We've got Albert," and they'd come back with him or whatever. And in Albert in the Air, he digs under the fence and gets caught in balloons and goes flying on an adventure. But luckily, I think his little garden friends will come to the rescue again. And then we have Albert and the Pond, where he makes a new friend in the pond. This is perfect for anyone studying tadpole to frog life cycle. And unfortunately, a bit of a spoiler there, Dave, I'm afraid, but we're very proud of that story indeed. And then we have Albert in the Shed, where he gets locked in the shed, taking shelter from a storm, and the little characters in the garden launch a very chaotic rescue mission. It's rubbish. It's nothing like Mission Impossible or anything like that. Tom Cruise, they are not. And it's hopefully very funny indeed. And we've also got our puzzle book out with colouring and mazes and join the dots and spot the difference, called Albert Puzzles and Colouring. And the first of our board books with Albert and his friends introduces the garden animals and their little characteristics, the idea of friendship, and also, of course, our favourite tortoise, Albert himself. And it's just wonderful. And Albert himself, combination of real Albert and book Albert, we're all over the social media now. We're on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter X and TikTok. Albert's got his own website, alberttortoise.com. And we post all the time, drawings from children from schools of Albert, or people dressing up for book day or book week or any special book events, if they have a go at an Albert costume, which we'd love to see. And it's just wonderful to do all this thing to do with Albert. And luckily, that then launched another project of mine called Hugg and Bugg, Dave, about a very messy Yeti. And I will quickly point out, at the moment, we do not have a pet Yeti. But if we need to get one for the publicity, we'll be on the hunt for a Yeti.
Well, good luck with that. Good luck with that.
Thank you. But it's Hugg and Bugg. And now I will quickly say, if I may, for any younger listeners here, I first wrote the first version of Hugg and Bugg when I was 7. It was a school project, school work. We were given a title, The Himalayan Flea, and we were told to write whatever we wanted and try and make it funny. And of course, back then, as now, I just loved writing, and I wrote far too much probably and got very carried away with it. I wasn't so great when it came to science or maths, unfortunately, not my key subjects, but anything to do with writing or reading or words, languages, all that used to get carried away. Anyway, I wrote this story about a very messy Yeti and a little flea who doesn't like cold. Very different, very different. And I have rewritten it and rewritten it and rewritten it for 40 years, probably. And luckily, Graphic, the publishers of the Albert book, said, have you got any other ideas? And I said, well, funny enough, I do. And by then, the book had become a rhyming book, so very different to the Albert books. And it's wonderful to have those books out there. We've got Finding Home, where they first encounter each other. Then we've got The Comb, where Hugg and Bugg come across a comb in the snow left by a mountaineer. and it threatens their relationship because the Yeti thinks he can look after his own fur now. But it does end okay. And just out, actually, not long, a couple of weeks ago, book 3, The Surprise, about a birthday party that goes a bit awry because of silly jealousy over friendship. And but luckily, again, I think it ends okay because we're now working on book 4. And Owen is busy. He does all the illustrations in oil paint. And each book takes, 4 or 5 months to paint and to write each book. I write very quickly, I have to say, luckily. That might be my journalism training or something, or working for telly. It was always against deadlines.
Yeah. Get the copy in. Get the copy
Once I have the idea, I let it mull in my head for quite a while. I may make some notes here and there, but then once it's sort of brewed and stewed in my head a bit, I will sit down and write it. There's a lot of rewriting afterwards. You have to polish these things, and mainly it's reducing the words. For picture books, it's all about the pictures. So you don't necessarily have to say the sky was blue, the sun was shining, if Owen does a picture where the sky is blue and the sun is shining. So that's, but it's just wonderful and so rewarding to do it. And of course, now I sort of then go face to face, a bit like a stand-up comedian, I suppose, with my audience, testing the material. And it's wonderful. The reactions have just been great over the last 3.5 years. Some wonderful feedback from children, reviews online, comments on Facebook and all the other social sites. And it's just wonderful how people are saying, oh, we love this, we love this little bit, we love this image, we love this idea, whatever. Lots of tortoise owners and turtle owners in America, we would say, have taken to the books as well. And Albert has gone global. He's gone absolutely global through Facebook in particular. We've got fans in Bhutan, all across America. The real Albert is now an ambassador for 2 tortoise and turtle charities in America, in California and Arizona. It's just amazing. We're working with various reading charities, Bookmark Reading, and another one, Stephen and George in Wales, who help put books into schools and get books in front of youngsters to encourage reading and writing and the love of words, which I have and which I try and share as well. And it's just wonderful, Dave. As I said, I keep repeating myself a bit, but it's changed my life, absolutely changed. I decided to throw myself into it, and luckily I'm able to do that. And it's just wonderful, really wonderful to be sharing all this. And all the Albert books as well are all about sort of teamwork, friendship, helping others, that sort of thing. And in the back of all the books, there's also sort of some quite interesting, we hope, facts about real Albert, other tortoises, turtles, frogs, toads, amphibians, the bugs, the snails, ants, bees, all sorts of things in all those books. And it's wonderful, really, really exciting.
Now, there's 2 things I want to pick up on from what you've been saying. And that is, first of all you children who are listening with your mum or your dad or with a family member who come to Dogsthorpe Infants, all you children who come to Dogsthorpe Infants, or if you go to another school and you listen to this, Ian said something really important about writing. Sometimes when we're playing with our toys or something and we start making up these stories, that's our imaginations kicking in. And rather than just play with the toys and just forget about it, think about that story, because maybe other people, as you're making up the story, maybe there are other people who would enjoy that story, and that's why we need to get into writing. So if you're in year 2, if you're a year 2 pupil, and you'll be practicing your writing and your storytelling, as you do that, think of Ian. So he must have been in year 2, or the equivalent of it in those days. And he wrote this story, and now look, he's actually making money out of it. So think about the stories we write and get into writing, children, because it's very, very important. That's the first thing. Second thing I want to point out is that our chair of governors, Al Kingsley, he's got 2 tortoises, and he brings them in to our early years, and they love meeting his 2 tortoises. And he often brings them over soon after they've woken up. So they're a bit sluggish, but they walk around, and I think the last time they came in, one of them did a poo, which gave great hilarity. Our children thought that was more interesting than the actual tortoise itself. But, these things have to be done.
They do. A tortoise has to do its business.
Of course it does. Of course it does. So our children, our early years, know about tortoises, and that will back up the stories of Albert. So that's really, really good. And the way that you mentioned Owen's illustrations, they are incredible paintings. It absolutely encapsulates everything about that story, because I looked at some of the books, and he's a very gifted artist, Ian.
He is, absolutely. He's also an animation director. So for some of the older children listening who might watch it, he does all the cartoons, all the animation for Operation Ouch on CBBC with Dr. Zand and Dr. The other one, the twin doctors who present that show. Apologies for not remembering both their names. And he's worked on all sorts of other projects over the years, animation, and we have done a couple of animation projects together as well. But he is loving doing this, and it's kind of his first love, is painting and book illustrating. And again, he was somewhat like me. He was trying to do that kind of work, and just for years and years couldn't get a look in. And some of it is down to luck. I guess a lot of it is down to perseverance, Dave. I just knew I'd had some good ideas. I knew Hugg and Bugg was a good idea. I didn't lose my temper. I didn't rage or anything. I just went back to the work. I kept having a go at it, trying to make it better and better and better. And I settled on it as a rhyming book because it had the little sort of bouncy feel to it of a flea hopping about, hopefully. And I'm thrilled that they're out there now. They're a little bit in the shadow of Albert because he's really taken off. But I'm, very, very proud of the Hugg and Bugg books. And I really did keep on trying with them. For a while, one publisher suggested it should be a gorilla because there was nothing in Yetis. No one was interested in Yetis or abominable snowmen or anything. And so I changed it to a gorilla, but it didn't work. It wasn't right because it had to be in the cold, in the snow, in the Himalayas, because the flea didn't want to be cold. So he was looking for somewhere warm to live. So it was sort of a daft comment, but you take it on the chin, and I just kept on going. Luckily, obviously, I had the other work I was doing to make a living, but I just knew I could hopefully get published. It's come a little bit late in my life, but I'm thrilled to be doing it. I'm absolutely thrilled. It's, I'm now doing exactly what I always wanted to do when I was about 18, I suppose.
Right.
And at that time, unfortunately, no one would give me a chance. But I got another chance, a different chance. That was wonderful. And here I am doing this now, and it's wonderful to do it.
And you go into many schools around the UK as well?
I must visit at peak sort of time. I would do about 3 schools a week, Dave.
What do you offer? What do you offer when you visit a school?
Well, what I offer is obviously me and a little bit of talk about sort of being a writer after 40 odd years of doing it. But I bring in a lookalike of Albert. I don't bring the real tortoise, unfortunately, because he's, it's not great to have him traveling big distances. And I come along with, get this, a 3-foot inflatable T-Rex to help me tell the Albert supersized story. And all the children join in on that one, hopefully, because we all have to roar like a dinosaur with that one. And I read at least 2 or 3 stories per session. I talk about real Albert, how we found real Albert, his age, whether he's fast or slow. There's a little trick question for the children there, whether they think the tortoise is fast or slow. I talk about what he eats a little bit, how all that sort of real information about real Albert inspired or had a little starting point for all of the books about Albert. Then I talk about Hugg and Bugg and how I wrote that when I was 7, how I kept on trying and trying to turn it into a book, and how luckily that has now happened, and how, you never know if you have an idea for a book or a story, just have a go is what I say. And I say it now here to your listeners, Dave. If you've got an idea, don't think about it too much. Make the time. Try and make the time one weekend or something, or after school. You may have schoolwork to do at home, to do your homework or whatever. But if you've got time, have a go. Just have a go at writing it. Show it to your teachers. If I come and visit, they can share it with me, or they can share it with me anyway through you, Dave, or through the school.
Absolutely.
I'd love to see people's work. If they write an Albert story, even more amazing. Lots and lots of children are having a go at Albert comic books, Albert pictures, Albert sort of like the idea for a story. They write a few lines and share it with us, and we put it all on Albert's blog, on his website, on his Facebook, on his Twitter. We share all this stuff, and I love to see it. I love to see people having a go. In fact, one of the books, Albert and the Shed, sort of has a bit of an open ending to it. A couple of the animals involved are left in a bit of a sticky situation at the end, and everyone's decides, well, what are we going to do about this? And quite a few schools and children are being asked to come up with what happens next, and that's wonderful. I love that, and it's really, really. I didn't write it thinking like that, but some teachers have had that idea, and it's wonderful to receive word from them and the ideas that the children are having. I promise I do not steal ideas for the books. I promise.
No, sure enough.
All the books are pretty much, their destiny is set now for a couple of years' time. But it's wonderful to see what our children come up with. Their imaginations are amazing, and I encourage it wholeheartedly. If you've got an idea for anything, a story, a comic book, a rap, a rhyme, a song, a play, a film, have a go, write it down. You never know where it might lead. Never know.
There we are, listeners. That's whether you're an adult or whether you're a child listening to this. There's some inspiration for you. If you've got a story, start it. And if you need a bit of help, talk to somebody or get in touch with Ian or with us, and we will help you. It's very, very important to get things down, ideas on paper, because maybe in those first few words of famous books that we now know and love, whether it's a children's book or a classic literature, it all started with one sentence, and it all has to start somewhere. And now look where it's all gone. People have made a career out of writing stories. So if you've got a story within you, do that. If you're a school in Peterborough or in Cambridgeshire or even further afield, and you're thinking about your curriculum, and maybe you do animals or maybe you do dinosaurs, think about getting Ian in, because here's somebody who is obviously playing on our side here. It's not just somebody who's pushing a book. This is somebody who's got lots of experience, and he's a wonderful guy. So get in touch with Ian. Ian, how can people get hold of your books?
Well, they're all over all the well-known shopping sites. Can I say a name in particular?
Oh, you can help yourself. Yeah. It's not the BBC.
Okay, well, they're obviously on Amazon in all the regions and various countries there. We're translated into Welsh as well, because we're a Welsh publisher. For anyone listening in Wales, the first 4 books are all translated into Welsh, and they're available as well. You can go to the publisher's website, grapheg.com. All our books are on there, the Albert the Tortoise and Hugg and Bugg. Also, we have a shop at Albert's website, which is alberttortoise.com, and all the books are on there. They're also on there as ebooks and animated ebooks with narration. For anyone who wants that, you just download those from the various Apple and whatever, where they're out there. And they are available to order sometimes in Waterstones and independent bookshops. Please support your local bookshops. We're in quite a few libraries as well. If I visit an area, I always try to get to the local library and gift some books as well. And just Google Albert the Tortoise or Hugg and Bugg, and it should all come up. But equally, another site will be alberttortoise.com.
Well, there we go. Don't worry if you didn't have a chance to do this. I know lots of people listen to this podcast as they're going to work or coming home from work, We've had all sorts of people say about all the things that they do whilst they're listening to this podcast. None of it's rude. I mean, it's all good stuff, and whatever it is, it's really, really good. Thank you for joining us and listening. Sometimes you've not got a pen and paper, especially if you're driving. That's not a good idea. So everything that Ian's mentioned is going to be in the text of this podcast. So when you get back home, go online. All of the things are there. You're just one click away from Ian. I'm sure it's going to be a great help to us. And who knows, children, you might go into the book nook one day and find Albert waiting for you in one of his books, one of his stories, and you can dive into Albert, this wonderful tortoise, on his adventures. And maybe we might even see a Yeti. I was listening to an interview, Ian, with Brian Blessed, and Brian Blessed, Gordon's alive, and he was convinced that he had seen a Yeti. Well, I don't know about that. It might, looking at him, it might have been just his reflection in the water. But I mean, what wouldn't it be great to discover a Yeti? I hope it fits in with your book.
I hope so too. You know what? A million years ago, Dave, you mentioned Brian Blessed. That was one of the ways I was trying to get that book published. I pitched it to his agent,
right,
to say, would Brian like to front this book?
Wow.
Celebrity books, of course, are all over the place, and books by people like me are not all over the place.
Yeah.
But it's this thing that didn't quite come together.
Right.
If ever we do a proper film of the Hugg and Buggs, and Brian is still with us, I'd love to have him do the voice of Hugg and Bugg.
That'd be good.
Because my character obviously is an abominable snowman. That's another term for a Yeti. But he can't say that. He calls himself a bummy nubble snowman. And I can just imagine Brian's having great fun with that phrase.
Yes,
I thought we would have lovely time with that.
Absolutely, indeed. Ian, thank you for joining us these last couple of weeks. It's been wonderful having you on the LaunchPads. When you get your new books out, don't forget us. Come back onto the show and tell us all about the new stories as and when they come along, whether that's about a little tortoise or whether it's about a Yeti. It doesn't matter. Come back on and share these wonderful stories. And folks, don't forget to, if you want to get in touch with Ian, just go into the text of this podcast and you're just one click away from these fabulous books and this wonderful man who's offering your school encouraging writing, encouraging reading. If he's going to bring in an inflatable dinosaur, there's a good reason within itself. Ian, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Eddie. I think Eddie's been a wonderful listener.
You have been listening to the Dogsthorpe Infant School podcast. Join Captain Dave and his co-pilot Eddie Edster, the well-being dog, on another LaunchPad soon. Until then, always remember to be kind, be respectful, and most of all, dream, believe, and shine. Dogsthorpe Infant School is part of Hampton Academies Trust.